Diego Lopes versus Jean Silva. Emo mullet versus autism maxer. Is the fighting nerd gonna get fraud checked 3 times in the span of 7 days? That's what we're gonna get to the bottom of in this video. And you guys already know how it goes. Let's go over the strengths and weaknesses of each fighter. Starting off with Diego Lopes. And the first thing you notice when looking at Diego Lopes is of course his abysmal haircut. And I honestly respect him for having the confidence to rock that. You can clearly tell that he just doesn't care. But besides that, he also has some really good boxing. He has insanely fast hands and good combos in the pockets. And on top of that, he has crazy power and a good chin. And he's mainly a boxer, but he does have a pretty good calf kick as well. And I'm gonna be honest, on the feet, he's kind of a marauder, okay? Not quite Andreas Gustafsson level, but I can respect the maraudery regardless. And also, people forget, man, he has nasty BJJ. Watch out, man, you do not want to be there with this guy. But unfortunately, he does have one major weakness, and that is of course his cardio. Because he throws everything into every single punch, and that's just a recipe for gassing out. And in order to cope with that in 5 rounders, he just keeps a way slower pace. And he's also quite hittable to the body because he uses a high guard, and he also doesn't really move his head a whole lot. Now when it comes to Jean Silva, he is a very diverse striker. He's a beast everywhere, man. But his real meat and potatoes, in my opinion, is his counters. He's very good at staying right out of range, then dipping back in with a hard counter. And he's also extremely powerful and athletic. And he can fight well going forwards and going backwards. But besides his striking, he also has pretty good takedown defense. He basically defended every takedown from Bryce Mitchell, who has very underrated takedowns in my opinion. And he also threatened multiple submissions in that fight and subbed Bryce Mitchell. So he does have a pretty underrated submission game in my opinion. Now he does have one major weakness, and that is leg kicks. I mean, you can just look back at that Bryce Mitchell fight. He really didn't address them at all, and he also has a very risky style. You know, he fights with his hands down and relies a lot on head movement and lean backs, and he's very good at that. But if he just makes a small mistake against someone with real power, it could potentially be very devastating. But let's go over the win conditions for each fighter. And let's start off with Lopes. And Lopes' way to victory in this fight is to pressure Silva so his back is up against the fence, in order to limit Silva's ability to just dip in and out of range. And he's also going to want to force Silva into phone booth exchanges, because that's where Diego Lopes really thrives. And he needs to throw a lot of feints and combos in this fight in order to make it harder for Silva to find easy counters. And he can't forget to chop that calf every time he gets the chance. Jean Silva is a fighter who relies a lot on movement, and a textbook way to compromise someone's movement is just to chop that leg. Now Jean Silva on the other hand is instead going to want to keep this fight out in the open, where he will be able to dip in and out of range with counters, and I believe he is a better striker when it comes to the tit for tat striking, and Lopes is really the most dangerous in the phone booth exchanges, so he needs to stay away from the fence in order to have the option to create distance. Now he's also going to want to target the body a lot. Lopes is prone to gassing out, and he's quite lanky as well, so he's naturally weak to the breadbasket. And I don't mean that in the Gaslam, DC or MMA Guru way. I mean it like, you know, he can take body shots as well. And Silva also grows into the fight, so the longer this fight goes on, the bigger of an advantage he's gonna have. But who do I think is gonna win this fight? And to be honest guys, I've been going back and forth a lot on this. Both are just so good, and there are so many factors in this fight. But if Lopes wants to win this fight, he needs to pressure Silva towards the fence in order to limit his options of movement. Because when it comes to the striking out in the open, Silva is just straight up better in my opinion. I mean, you can look back at the Ortega fight. There were certain moments out in the open where Ortega was just tagging him clean with jabs. And I understand the Eagle has underrated boxing, but Jean Silva is not getting tagged by naked jabs from Brian Ortega. That's just not happening. And I also think Lopes is gonna have some issues pressuring him, because when you look at Lopes' opponents, none of them have power like Jean Silva, and it's a lot easier to walk through someone with pillow hands like Ortega because there's zero risk of getting knocked out. And Lopes doesn't really chase his opponents too much unless they're hurt. I mean, you can look at the Volk fight and you'll see that he isn't really that good at cutting off the cage, and I understand that it's Speedy Gonzalez Volk, who's a lot better at moving laterally than Jean Silva, but Silva has a lot more power in his hands, and if he successfully does pressure Silva to the fence, Silva still has some crafty elbows, and he still so as powerful in the phone booth as well. And if you watch the Dober fight, he does know when to put his hands up. But I will say though, the calf kick is gonna be a problem unless he addresses it, because he is a fighter who relies a lot on movement, and if that leg gets kicked a lot, that movement is gonna get a lot more compromised. And the fact that Lopes does throw a lot of combos could be dangerous, because usually it's easier to counter fighters who throw single shots, because you won't have to worry too much about follow-up punches, but at the same time you can flip that around. If Lopes gets countered midway through a 4-punch combo, I guarantee that's gonna hurt. And I also don't think Lopes is built for 5-rounders. I know he wasn't too gassed in the Volk fight, but he kept a significantly slower pace in that fight, which allowed Volk to win majority of exchanges. So I'll be honest, I'm leaning Jean Silva here, and I just think he's an all-around better striker. He has better distance management, better defense, better counters, and he's fast and powerful enough to prevent Lopes from just walking through him. And when this fight was first announced, I actually was picking Lopes, but I was honestly looking too much into small details like the calf kick and that he throws punches in bunches. But when I'm looking at the fight as a whole, Silva is just better in more areas on the feet, and he's better in more crucial areas too. And sure, I understand calf kicks can cause accumulative damage, but as I said before, I do think Lopes will have a lot of trouble pressuring Silva, and even if he is able to back him up against the cage, Jean Silva still has some very dangerous tools in the phone booth, and Silva also grows into the fight, whereas Lopes fades away the longer the fight goes on. And if he does keep a slower pace, I just think he will get outstruck. But I will say, I do fear a fraud check here, because Lopes is still extremely dangerous, and he's faced way better comp than Silva's faced, but I will be going with Jean Silva in this one. Now that said, I think that's it for today guys. Check out my last video where I coped about Andreas Gustafsson losing. But anyways, thanks for watching, leave a like, subscribe if you enjoyed the video. Am I just a Jean Silva glazer? Who do you think is gonna win? Let me know your thoughts in the comments, and also don't forget to share this video to a Lopes fan, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye!